If you have a reactive dog, or if you've ever even worked with a reactive dog, you'll know what I mean when I say that sometimes it feels like you're the reactive one. So a lot of your walks will look like exactly what your dog's doing, where you're scanning the environment for triggers. So if your dog's reactive to other dogs, you're constantly looking ahead, trying to notice the other dogs in the environment before your dog does, so that you can then cue an appropriate behaviour, or if needs be, remove your dog from the situation. Obviously that can be quite exhausting, and the other issue that comes with that is often we see a dog and subconsciously we are changing our body language or even just our breathing rate, and therefore our dog is picking up on some subtle cues that we're giving off that say, oh god, time to tense up, there may be a reaction here, and they're feeling like we're actually a bit nervous about that trigger as well. A lot of my clients are actually what I would describe as reactive. They're really anxious when they're out with their dogs, and it's fair enough. They're seeing their dog explode time and time again, and they are really tense and they're embarrassed and just don't like walking their dogs anymore. It's a really stressful experience. Now, often as dog trainers, we come in and say, right, in that situation, can you cue the dog to do X, Y, Z? So we may teach the dog, for example, to give really strong eye contact when they see another dog so that we can walk past the other dog with eye contact. The issue is we're always asking the owner, therefore, to scan the environment. You're saying to the owner, you have to notice that trigger first in order to control the situation. And that's fine, and for some people it does work really well. However, there is a more sophisticated way of doing this that means the owner can relax a bit. Now, if we look at a dog's senses, in particular smell, they're a lot stronger than ours. So always having to take the responsibility of noticing a dog or a stranger, or whatever the trigger is, coming into the environment doesn't really make too much sense. So ideally, what you want to do is teach the dog to actually cue you to the presence of a trigger. In order to get your dog cueing you to the presence of triggers in the environment, you've got to kind of change the way you think about the dog's triggers. So for the rest of this video, let's just imagine we're talking about dog-to-dog reactivity. It makes it a bit easier to explain what I'm talking about. So when your dog sees another dog enter the environment, that is actually a cue. It's an environmental cue, but in much the same way as me doing this hand signal means to Otis sit, and me doing this hand signal means to Otis touch, a dog entering the environment will also cue some sort of behaviour from him. Now the issue with a reactive dog is that it's cueing the wrong behaviour. Dog entering the environment cues the behaviour of a big reaction. So lunging, barking on the lead, something we don't want. But you can teach the dog a replacement behaviour. So for example, dog entering the environment equals look at me. Now, getting your dog to respond to environmental cues so that you're not having to pick up on them is not a new concept. It's something that's been around for a very long time. It makes a lot of sense, and taught properly, it's really effective. But there has been a more recent shift in teaching the dog to give a tactile response. So I think it was Kathy Sado that was talking about this initially with her dog Smudge. But essentially, she found she had an issue with clients where the dog would be giving them eye contact, and it would be going, look, there's a dog there, and alerting, giving the client or her client as much eye contact as possible. But obviously, we can be distracted. So maybe the client's scanning the environment for other triggers, or they're on their phone, and they're not noticing the dog giving them eye contact. So even better, we can teach the dog to give a tactile response. For example, dog sees another dog entering the field, and your dog will hit your hand with their nose, which is exactly what this trainer taught her dog to do. So I tried this out with Otis a couple of years ago, and it actually works really nicely. Now, the issue people have is kind of brainstorming, well, how can I get my dog to give me that cue once they've seen their trigger? You need to have a reasonable amount of kind of control around that trigger already. So you can't do this if your dog is still exploding when there's a dog all the way the other side of the field. You need to counter condition a bit first, because your dog needs to be under threshold or sub threshold. So I need my dog to be able to think when they're seeing the trigger. Otherwise this training is not going to work. So if I know my dog's threshold is from here to the other side of the room and they can cope with that kind of distance, I'm going to position maybe a dog trainer's dog or a friend. I'm going to say to them, right, can you stay that distance away and just walk parallel, just walk up and down. And then what I'm going to do with my dog every time they glance at that dog, I am going to cue the behaviour I want. So they look at the dog and I'm going to say touch, stick my hand out until they put their nose onto my hand, for example. Or if you like the behaviour of paw, you can teach the dog to target your hand or your calf with their leg instead. Whatever makes sense to you. Now, this makes a lot of sense when we think about teaching the dog a name. So when Olive came to me, she was a rescue and she was called Coco. Now she didn't really know her name, but in order to teach her that her new name was Olive, I said Olive and then Coco. That's because she already knew the second word. So the word olive starts to predict that a relevant cue is coming. So this is exactly the same as when you're training cue transference to the dog's trigger. So instead of them kind of having that big reaction, you're going to let them glance at the dog and then cue the behaviour. And dogs very quickly pick up and predict patterns. So eventually they're going to see another dog and go, well, I know my human's about to cue touch, and they're going to start giving you that behaviour. It will take a lot of repetitions. And the other thing to bear in mind is dogs don't generalise too well unless it's something that's really important to them. So you're going to need to practice this in lots of different contexts and around lots of different dogs. But the key thing is you're working the dog's sub-threshold so they are able to think and give you the behaviour when you cue it. And also that you're relevant to the dog in that situation. So you need to have kind of a motivation system, good markers, food and so on behind what you're asking the dog to do. But cue transference, which is essentially teaching the dog that cue in the environment actually means touch now, versus me saying touch and sticking my hand out means touch. That's all cue transference means. But cue transference is a really, really nice way of stopping you from having to scan the environment constantly and be on edge around your dog's triggers.